Go ahead and hit that follow button like it just cut you off in traffic. Tonight we've got Kristin Aleshire, former county commissioner, current city council member, and one of the few guys who read city budgets just for fun. Buckle up. Here we go. Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And tonight we're talking with Kristin Aleshire. He's a longtime public servant. He's a former Washington County Commissioner, and he's a current Hagerstown City Council member, known for his steady hand and his deep local roots. Welcome, Kristin.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you for your time, your service, and your insight. We appreciate you joining us tonight. Hey, I just wanted to ask you, the first question I got for you is you served both as a Washington County Commissioner and now as a Hagerstown City Councilman. Have those roles shaped your approach to solving local challenges?
Oh yeah, they're two very different animals. I got elected when I was 25 to City Council, youngest elected official for the city. And I was a Democrat then. I was a young individual. You're coming off of the Bill Clinton years, right? And I ran a second time. So the first time I squeaked by, the fifth seat. The second time I ran, I came in first. I think camera does wonders for citizens to be able to watch their elected officials. So I think, the city was early on in televising its meetings, and I think that helped because the first time around, folks looked at me like, I don't know if I want this kid, running this big city. And then the second time around, like, okay, this kid knows his stuff. And so it worked out well, so well that I ran for county commissioner. And I really ran for county commissioner because the city and the county were at endless odds at that time. So I thought, I'll run for county commissioner. I'll get in there and I'll sort of bridge the gap. Well, I got in and the council that I left sort of didn't, trust me now that I was a commissioner. And the commissioners really didn't trust me because I came from the city. And so there was no real bridging that gap. I was sort of looked at with a bit of a slight eye, on the way in the door. And it didn't help that I was the only Democrat on the board of county commissioners. And so, the commission form of government is a lot of going places and talking to people in a big space and not really having much power to do anything, right? Because the towns are all charter form of government. You got to go ask the state delegation for anything you want. And you got to depend on that state delegation being the same partisan affiliation that you are. City government's a lot different because it's a charter form and you're a bit more autonomous. And you're not really dealing with partisan issues. And so they were just two very different things. And, I wasn't invited back the second time to be a commissioner. And so I resumed my duties at city council, which I like municipal government way more. I would never run for county commissioner in a commission form of government again.
So that, local government isn't supposed to be partisan, right? I mean, more voters are noticing that national politics are creeping into city and county decisions. What role do you think that partisan politics belongs in local government?
None. When it comes to the municipal level, none. I just don't, it just isn't that way. I think, folks that come in with that partisan sort of chip on the shoulder realize within about the first 6 months that like, you know what? There's not a lot of partisan stuff we get to like work on and decide upon and have an effect to that you're just representing, the X number of citizens on very local things. People care more about when trash is getting picked up, and if their parks look nice at the town level of government than they do about, some partisan ordinance that you might pass.
Yeah, parks and trash and police officers and roads don't have any partisan affiliation.
No.
And just so we understand the time frame, when was it that what year were you elected to city council? What year did you end up going to county commissioners? And what year did you come back to the city council?
So I was elected in 2001 to the city the first time, got reelected in 2005. I left the city about halfway through that term in the end of 2006, and then left my term with county government in 2010. Came back to city government roughly 2012, 2013. There was the city changed its time frame in which the election was held. It went from a separate election time frame to being on, the gubernatorial and presidential cycles. When I ran for county commissioner in 2010, though, I really didn't want to be honest with you. But here's the reality. It was me and like 14 Republicans running, and you had a lot of Democrats going, hey, we need you to do this. We need you to do this. Well, that's all well and good, but at the end of the day, I think I got 21,000 votes, but only 14,000 Democrats showed up to vote. And so it's really hard to win when the other party has 10,000 more voters show up to the polls than the party that you're running on. And that's why I'm not a big fan of the partisan election process.
Is that why you became an independent?
So I'm just going to be real honest with you. It was very clear among my, when I say my party, I was a Democrat at the time, that they were looking for folks like me. And that's just the reality. And I just didn't want to be part of either party. To be honest, I just looked at sort of what I did at the city level and what I did at the county level. And I'll put it this way, I remember there was a rezoning case for a campground up in Hancock, and I was just a staunch opponent of that. And, it really didn't matter that the other four that were Republicans that were in favor of that rezoning up in Hancock for that campground, all the folks in Hancock knew was that I had a D in front of my name and the other four guys had an R in that district. In fact, out of the 50 election districts at that time for my second run for county commissioner, I think I won like 25 or 26 of them, whereas the first time I won 30 all around the city. And so, I just looked at that and went, okay, that's certainly not the direction I wanted to go. And so, the Republicans showed up, and it didn't matter, that I was, fairly centered in my approach to deciding on things. And the Dems didn't show up, and I just was like, okay, I think that I've done well enough as an individual. I can just simply do this as an individual.
And you bring up, of course, the fact that even then at that time, which if I'm following correctly, about 2010 timeframe is what you're referring to. And you mentioned that even then, the partisan politics, the division. And of course, you having started there in 2001, you've had a bit of a front seat, so to speak, to this increasing divide that has been going on since, I would say, roughly that time period. So from your perspective, a little bit more on the inside, how would you what is your take on where this increasing divide has come from? And what do you think could be done about it?
So let me tell you how dumb this is. Now think about this for a second. John Barr was the president of the Board of County Commissioners when I ran the first time. So in 2006, we all got elected together, and John was the president of the Board of County Commissioners, right? He runs again, gets elected. I think he fell just shy of being the president again. And then the third time he runs as unaffiliated, right? Him and Bill McKinley were upset with the Republican Party locally, and they ran unaffiliated. And he loses miserably. Doesn't even come close, right? And then he runs again the next time, and he's the president of the county commissioners again, because he runs the next time as a Republican. So he runs twice, is the top voted Republican in this county, runs unaffiliated, doesn't even get close on the ballot, switches back to Republican, gets elected president again. And here's the even sillier part. And this is what I hate about the state of Maryland. He had to go out and collect like 1,300 signatures just to run as an unaffiliated candidate. Now, he's elected with 30,000 plus votes twice as a Republican, But simply because he runs unaffiliated the third time, now he's got to go out and basically beg for votes just to get on the ballot. It doesn't make sense. And if you look at the state election board, the people that make those decisions are an equal representation of the two primary parties of the state. That's what the state election law says. And the two primary parties are Republicans and Democrats. Meanwhile, the most registrations of new registered voters go to third party registrations. It just doesn't make sense.
So I think what you're saying is that newer people coming on board are rejecting the two-party system, which is
Oh yeah.
actually a real it's a real trend right now. And with Elon Musk threatening to start a third party, that could really upset the apple cart, don't you think?
Well, I think that it is an absolutely necessary organic thing that's happening. It's going to take time, but you can't have a state election law that says the two primary parties get to decide all the rules and then make all the rules in favor of only the primary parties being able to get easily on the ballots. You just can't do that.
Question. That's an excellent, that's an excellent thought. What you are facing up there with the commissioners is what, around the state Republicans are facing. The super majority of red up there is kind of freezing out any concerns from the blue side. And statewide, the super majority of blues is freezing out the reds. So I agree with you. We agree with you. The two-party system, it's not conducive to good government because it doesn't foster any kind of growth, any kind of intellectual thought, any kind of actual challenge to the status quo.
Of course, one of the things that does happen, though, is that with the parties, because they do have specific things that they represent, right? I mean, every party has its platform and is very detailed. And so what happens is for the average voter, how are they to know kind of the ins and outs and the nuances that would be required in order to know the difference between John Barr running one way, another way, you running as a Democrat or an independent, etc. And so I guess that is perhaps the age-old question, but how do we educate and how do we break through kind of that the information and get it out to the public in order to have a more free-flowing and competitive political system?
Well, first, I don't think that it's about educating the public because there are machines from both sides that control that media approach, no matter how much we want to say that the free flow of ideas are out there. But the first thing that has to happen, the absolute first thing that has to happen is a candidate that wants to be on the ballot for local office should simply be able to get on the ballot in a partisan election process. In other words, I'm all for Republicans if they've got more than 5 having a primary, and Democrats if they have more than 5 having a primary. But a guy from the Green Party or a lady from an independent party shouldn't have to go around and do extra steps simply the ballot the way that the other two individuals are simply allowed to do so. In other words, I shouldn't have to go out and have this Herculean effort to collect 1,500 signatures to get on a ballot. To me, that's absolutely not legal. It's not fair. You should just say, okay.
It's patently unfair. I don't know if
Jane
it's
Smith,
legal,
if
but
you
it's
want to run,
absolutely unfair.
yeah, I'll never understand that. So what's the purpose of a person from another party, regardless of what that party is, of having to go through additional steps and only being able to get on the general ballot late in the process, once they've established that they've collected some random number of signatures?
And for you, in this last election for the city, you ran as an independent. Is that correct?
I've ran independent, I believe, the last 3 city elections. In fact, I was an independent. Yeah, so the last 3 city elections, I believe.
And for you to get on the city ballot as an independent, did you have to go through those steps, or was it just the city election runs different?
The city got rid of partisan elections in, I think, 2012.
Okay, all right. So essentially, everyone who runs is technically an independent.
Correct. And here's the reality. If I would have switched my party to Republican, let's say 2008, 2009, when I was a Board of County Commissioners, right? 2010, I'm not naive, right? I'm already there. I'm already elected. I'm a known quantity. My name's at the top of the ballot. If I'd have ran as a Republican in 2010, I would have probably been the president of the county commissioners. That's just a reality. That's just a reality of the way the electorate was going at that time, and the fact that it swings from gubernatorial to presidential with this sort of wave of ups and downs, depending on how things are going, well outside of the local level of politics in those cycles.
And the saddest part is that local politics is what affects taxpayers the most, but they pay very little attention to it. Hey, I want to move on to another question. And this is a one, about Hagerstown itself. It's a small city, but it faces some very serious issues, Kristin, around crime, drug addiction, and homelessness. Where do you think the city has responded well, strong, and where do you think they might need a course correction on those issues?
Well, one of the misconceptions, and this came up back when Senator Porterman sent us a letter. I don't know when that was. I think November something last year. But one of the misconceptions is that the city funds the agencies and entities and organizations and has authority over those agencies and entities and organizations that serve the population that you're referring to. And here's the reality: the city doesn't have any authority over those entities. The city doesn't fund those organizations, and the city doesn't sort of manage or maintain or monitor the activities of those entities that provide those services. And I think that one of the areas that we falter a bit is that even in spite of the fact we've met with all of the folks that do have that authority, do have that administrative responsibility. I think that there's this notion the city can sort of wave a wand and fix, and manage those issues unilateral from the fact that there are dozens and dozens of entities and organizations that provide that service, and in the urban setting where traditionally all of the folks involved feel that that's exactly where it should be.
Now, so what you bring up, of course, is a very controversial and perhaps the most controversial issue, and arguably the most important issue in Hagerstown, because the level of homelessness, the level of addiction, the level of crime on a per capita basis is quite high. I don't know if you'd agree or disagree with that, but statistically, I believe that we are in the top 10% nationally.
60 Hagerstown is 60 times higher than the Maryland average for violent crime.
Right. And on a per capita basis.
Yeah.
And so one of the issues is a very important one, is what you just mentioned, which is that essentially there's a bunch of organizations, from perhaps homeless shelters, but also needle exchange programs, and a list, like you mentioned. It's actually quite a long list, but they have set up shop, so to speak, in the center part of Hagerstown, which is the commercial center, and therefore, the primary source of tax revenue. Mm-hmm.
With the support financially of county, state, and federal governments, not the city, with support from the county. County gaming funds goes to dozens of the organizations you're talking about. State manages and monitors, right, and oversees most of the people and entities that you're talking about, and funds them either directly or through pass-through funding from federal entities.
Okay. And so what it is, of course, is those entities have set up shop, so to speak, there in the commercial center. And many of the services that are provided are specifically services that don't in any way, shape, or form help the homeless or drug addicts actually get clean. They kind of are services that just cater to the continuation of the problem, and don't actually heal anything. And just a personal observation that I've had is that I spend quite a bit of time in West Virginia, and particularly Martinsburg. And one thing that I've noticed is that the homeless population in Martinsburg has dropped by about 2/3 during the time frame that residents of Hagerstown point to and say, "Wow, where's this explosion come from?" And I believe that there is a connection because these services and such don't exist in the way that they do in Martinsburg as they do in Hagerstown. So I guess what I think residents are asking is, yes, obviously, if what funding is coming from the city, but also is, do you have control over the zoning or where this is set up? Do you have
No,
any control over the placement of these organizations?
not really. We do not have the same. Um, well, and here's the reality. Before I answer that question, I'd like to go to Berkeley County in the state of West Virginia and see what degree of facilitation and authority that they apply, within Martinsburg, because they're very different animals. The state of Maryland and the state of West Virginia are very different entities. Berkeley County, Washington County, very different entities,
Mhm.
and I can recall when, well, a number of cases, but you know, when I look back over 20 years, I can think of, okay, when Change Health came in downtown and we said, okay, we don't know that we want this operation next to City Hall. We're getting complaints, et cetera. And I remember a gentleman coming in. He was an attorney, I think, from the Baltimore area, representing that entity, and said, hey, if you guys attempt to apply local zoning to this operation, we will see you in federal court. So this notion, this misconception that the city has authority over these operations, individuals are simply looking at the wrong entity to apply those metrics. It's no different than the fact the meters, right? So we have the parking meters downtown, and folks were upset that we took those out. But the reality is this: folks were breaking into them, right, emptying them out, sometimes even giving the change back to the person putting it in there, and then going to court, because our officer arrests them, and then getting out literally as our officers leaving the courthouse and going back and doing the same thing. And so, the city doesn't have any authority to go to the court system and say, hey, we'd really like you to keep that person in or send that person somewhere else. That doesn't exist. The city doesn't have that ability with that entity. It doesn't have the ability to go to the Washington County Health Department that is overseen by the county and funded by the state, and say, we would prefer you would stop operations for whatever operations we may not agree with within the city of Hagerstown. We don't have that ability. I hear what you're asking,
Mhm. Mhm.
but what you're asking is beyond the city's capability. We don't have the ability to go to the county commissioners and say, hey, we'd like you to look at how you're divvying up the gaming funds, because about 75% of the gaming funds are collected by businesses and operations outside of the city, and about 80% of those gaming funds are spent on nonprofit operations in the city, or entities and organizations. And I think that I've been a part of 6 or 7 administrations that sort of repeatedly ask that question, and the answer is always the same. The city has authority over the limited parameters of those activities that the city has the authority over.
And that makes perfect sense. I guess just to a follow-up clarification question, and you do make a very good point that the way the laws around West Virginia, the voting of Berkeley County, et cetera, is very different than in Maryland and Hagerstown. But what Martinsburg does, and to the people I've spoken to, it boils down to
Mhm.
two things. And I just wonder your take on them or their applicability to Hagerstown. But
Mhm.
essentially, it boils down to two primary things. One is that they moved the homeless shelter from downtown, several blocks out of downtown. The
We don't
second
have that
thing that
authority.
Okay. And then the second thing that they did is that they took the where obviously police know with a good degree of accuracy where the drug trade is occurring. And so when landlords in their properties, drug dealers and drug dens are busted, the city had a policy whereby they give increasingly large fines to the owners, to the landlords. And particularly apparently after that step, is where kind of it correlates with the biggest reduction in drug use, crime, and the homeless population in Martinsburg. Does that have any applicability to City Council in Hagerstown?
I believe that you're referring to the ordinance that they passed that Austin Heffernan, when he was on city council, introduced for us to look at. And I believe we were told unequivocally by folks at the state that that is not constitutional in the state of Maryland. So that is an issue that I know that the new administration has now sort of resurfaced and wants to revisit. And and I say this all the time. I'm for whatever those ordinances are that we look at to pass that improves quality of life and public safety. Right? We have the habitual offender ordinance. I had to basically kick and scream to get us to pass the hotel ordinance. We just passed I know we're going to get challenged by the state on this, but we just passed the unhoused, basically sleeping on city property
For lack of a
ordinance.
better term, the tent ordinance, right?
Yeah, the camping ordinance, but you know, so I don't know that there's an ordinance, whether it's rental registration, hotel registration, et cetera, that I've ever said no to, but but you know that's sort of the degree of action that the city can take. We can't go and which homeless shelter are you talking about? Because there's clearly more than one. And what authority does the city have to say, hey, I'm sorry, you can't operate your business or your nonprofit there. You have to move it out of the city. We don't have that ability.
Could you zone it out?
No.
The state would. It sounds like Annapolis has got a lot of control over the business of the local
Well,
municipalities.
I remember Mayor Keller going down and testifying on behalf of the city because we were looking for the state to help us with the dirt bikes. Right, they were rampant around the city about 4 or 5 years ago, and I can remember her basically getting just ran out of the room by the committee in Annapolis over that. Like, how dare us want to shut down the fun, that these kids are simply having, right? And so we said, we stepped back, and our police chief said, why don't we use drones? And so we spent money developing the drone program, and within months that summer, and I think even since, the dirt bike activity has significantly declined. So there are solutions out there for things that we are impacted by that reduce quality of life, but there are absolutely limitations that are different in the state in which we operate within than other states that you're referring to.
So there are some things that are out of your control, but as a Hagerstown council member, you do have control over the fiscal responsibility and long-term planning for Hagerstown. And
Mhm.
you've always been very fiscally conservative, in my opinion. What do you think the city's getting right as far as it comes to fiscal responsibility and planning? And what do you think that they might need to improve on?
Well, I mean, I think what we get right are a couple of things. The first is obviously our utility operations, water and sewer, electric. All three of those items are less expensive than pretty much anywhere else. In the region, probably in the Mid Atlantic. And so, we have a fairly robust utility infrastructure system. We have to keep ahead of that. And so I think that we do those things well. I will tell you on the general fund side, we invest, I think, probably 70 to 80% of every tax dollar property tax dollar goes into public safety. You know, we're one of only 4 municipalities left out of 157 in the state of Maryland to have a paid fire department. We have clearly a robust police department. It did decline there for about a 10-year period. I think that you know, had to do with pay and local issues, and I think it had to do with state and national issues, frankly. But you know, we got a bit extreme on incentive approaches to that. You know, at the direction of our
Can you
police.
elaborate on that, Kristin? Can you elaborate on that? You're right that the police departments across the country were
Mhm.
declining. I know Hagerstown has stopped that flow, and you guys have
We did.
actually are on the upcheck. What specific things did the council do in order to attract more police officers?
Well, I mean, you know, and I don't know the specific numbers off the top of my head, but I seem to recall, you know, we started out at like a $5,000 signing bonus, and then jumped to like a $20,000 signing bonus, and then like, you know, $40,000 to transfer from another department. We increased pay, you know, I think like 62 or 63,000. So, you know, we had to invest a good bit of money into that, and you know, like it or not, that clearly resulted in the need to adjust taxes this past year. We sort of lived off of, if you will, the emptiness in the police budget for the last 6 or 8 years. You know, so you have that funding in the budget for the folks, you know, for the number of personnel you want on the police force, but you don't have that number physically, right? And so you have some wiggle room in the budget to use that money elsewhere. And we made a commitment to our police chief. We said, if you find a way to assist us in mechanisms that reverse course on this and increase our police force back to where we believe it should be, we will come back to the table and we will find that money and put it back in the budget for you. And so we had to do that, you know, and folks say, well, you know, you're not doing enough for public safety. Here's the reality. I don't know many other entities that spend 70 to 80% of every tax dollar on public safety for their municipal operations.
But one of the comments that I heard you make in the last election during the campaign is you're giving a presentation along with a number of other city council candidates, and you made the statement that it's very important that governments show a profit. I think is actually how you worded it. I thought that was a very profound statement. One, not many politicians, even from the political party that is accredited with thinking that way, rarely is that statement made so specifically. Also, in light of what's happening with the state on the state level, the deficits that we're headed towards, the loss of the credit rating that we've had, and of course how it increases taxes statewide and for city residents as well. So my question is, what did you mean by that?
Sure. There's two things. One is there's two parts to that. The first part is this: government needs to stay in the black. You know, when it comes to operations, managing your funding operationally, stay in the black. And when I say that, you know, you have your general fund, your enterprise fund, and your CIP, right? And your CIP is that separate area where you know, borrowing to a certain degree is a responsible approach for those capital investments that you need to make over a long period of time, because as much as folks would like government to sort of, you know, self-fund year after year those things, it just doesn't work that way. So I think that the first part of that is remaining in the black. And the second part of that is this, and I can say this fairly confidently, you know, after working for a number of municipalities and being in city office for a number of years, is this: you should make sure that the moves that you're making budgetarily ensure that you are as prudent and efficient with your funding in good times as you are in bad, because they are always coming. And I think that the best example I give to that is the Board of County Commissioners that I served with around 2008 when things started to crash. You know, it was Bill and Terry and I largely that said, okay, this down thing is really happening, and we need to figure out a way to make sure that the belt is as tight as it needs to be. And again, I was fairly conservative, in that process consistently. That didn't register at the polls with county voters, and that's life. Those are, I think, the two pieces that I mean by that.
I think I've always found you, Kristin, to be fiscally conservative. You're almost a Republican fiscally conservative.
Well, I,
No, I know. Believe me, I make a joke, but you are a very fiscally conservative politician. In a time where people want to tax and spend, it's refreshing to have a politician that actually wants to live within the budget provided. That's rare, and we thank you for that as citizens.
Yes.
yeah,
I know you don't take compliments well. Sorry about that. All right.
that's
So
okay.
anyway, listen, we are almost out of time here, Chris, and I just want to give you an opportunity to share anything that you would like to share with our viewers who are in the mid Maryland area.
You mean broadly, or as it relates to the city?
Anything that you want to add, either from
Well,
Hagerstown, broadly, whatever you like.
well, I'll say this. I went to MML this year, and it's been a while since I've went to MML, and what I noticed this
Can
year at
you, by the
MML.
way, I'm going to have to listen, Kristen. I'm going to have to caption all of the politician east that you use. It's MML, the Maryland Municipal
Yeah.
League. It's
So I went
CIP, Capital Improvement Programs. You gotta spell it out for us dumb people.
So I went to the Maryland Municipal League conference this year, and I hadn't been in a number of years. And I'm used to like going to those, and you got all these vendors, and you got these classes, and it's all very hands-on stuff, right? And I'm a government employee, so I operate on a very hands-on level, both physically and thought-wise when it comes to government operations. And I was a bit surprised. I don't know if the right word's alarmed yet, but I was definitely surprised at the level of AI, artificial intelligence oriented things that were being introduced into the governmental process. And I have to tell you, while there's probably a place out there for AI as we go along, I'm a Gen Xer. I remember, the Terminator series, and I'm thinking, a week later, these stories come out about, that AI is trying to preserve itself from being shut down, on some server, et cetera. And I don't know how much of that is true, but I'm like, I don't know that I want AI running the city water treatment plant. I don't know that I want AI, deciding when trash gets picked up, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, I was just maybe a bit taken aback at how much has changed in the 6 or 8 years since I've been to the Municipal League conference, because I'm so used to it being, much more hands-on, much more personnel oriented. And I don't know how much the citizenry is ready in general for AI to sort of take over the governmental operations, that they expect to receive. And so that's probably one thing sort of off the side that I've noticed in the last few months or come across.
It's AI and its infiltration of government is alarming, I believe. I agree. And like you, I don't want a Terminator showing up at my door because he looked me up in the phone book. But then again, phone books don't exist anymore, so it's all right.
Right.
Hey, Kristin, we really want to thank you for joining us tonight. Your time, your service, and your insight, especially since I know you have like 47 children and you probably got a lot of time. You don't got a lot of time to give away. But we very much appreciate you being here. And we definitely would love to have you on in the future if you'd like to come out.
Yeah, anytime. I'm happy to chat anytime.
All right. Thanks again to our guest, Kristin Aleshire. He is a city councilman in Hagerstown. I'm your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And we just want to thank you for joining in. Please like and follow, especially follow the page, and tune in next time for another episode of Mid-Maryland Votes. Thank you very much.
That's a wrap for this episode of Mid-Maryland Votes. Go ahead and like, comment, and follow the show, unless, of course, you think that politics is just another form of adult daycare. Hey, if you got questions for us, or you got a beef or a conspiracy theory, drop it in the comments below. I promise you we will read it. We read everything, including the mean stuff. I kind of like the mean stuff.